Now, the open-ended section in science paper is always a concern for many students. Alright, they find that doing MCQ is easier and open-ended is more difficult. Well, is that really the case? Once you learn the tricks of understanding how to do open-ended questions, it will no longer be scary. And I will show you the way. Hi, I'm Mr. Long and I'm your science teacher today. And this series of video, I'll do 3 parts of it. We're going to figure out how to answer open-ended questions in science. I'll be using the practice papers from Primary 3, Primary 4, Primary 5. In this first video, I will use Primary 3 paper. Now, some of the questions can be used by students of different levels for revision. So for the Primary 3 paper, I'll be focusing on question 22, 24 and 27. But then the noise in my vicinity here. These are the topic being covered for question 22. This is the one for question 24, and some of the words here that will come up in the questions are as listed here, like variables, conclude, observation. For 27 is on parts and function of a plant. Words such as setup, function, reason. Now, why do I talk about such words? Now, I'm not talking about keywords here, just to clarify. I'm talking about words as used in a language. Now, to me, science is a whole new language. It is using English, but it does use words that are not often used in our daily language. We don't use the word variable, conclude, observation, setup, function, reason in most of our day-to-day language. Hence, unpacking this, understanding this, will go a long way to understand what a science question requires of you, so you can provide the best possible answer. In the second video, I'll work from the Primary 4 practice paper, and I'll look at question 35 and 39. And these are more experimental setup questions. We talk about things like relationship, variables to be kept the same, variables to be chosen, changed variables, aim of the experiment, changing strength of electromagnet. We also revise through some of the topics as we go through this, but the main focus will be on how to unpack a question rather than looking at revising the concept of each of these topics. And for Primary 5, we'll be looking at the question 33A and 33B. Now take note that P3 and P4 can also look at these questions in a third video. Alright, and try this question because it is on properties of materials, which the Primary 3 learns in term 3 this year. And for the P4s, they can do 33B because that is on heat conductivity of materials. Right, on how to read diagrams and data from table and how to justify choice of materials. So, this set of questions is useful for all P3, P4 and P5s. And now we're going to get down to it. Alright, let's go to the first question. Question 22. Now, for those who do not have this paper because you are Primary 4 or 5 students, as before, I will ask you to pause the video, try answering it on a piece of paper, and then listen to the explanation and look at the answer. For the Primary 3s, do the same thing, as in you will listen to the explanation, and then afterwards you'll pause the video to do the corrections. Now, Joe places a healthy grasshopper in each of the containers A and B. Healthy grasshopper. This tells us that if the grasshopper were to die, it's not because it is sick or it has a disease, it is healthy. Alright, and this tells us it is a living thing. And a living thing means that it always needs air, food, and water to survive. Primary 3s, please make sure that you are doing this annotation as we are going through this paper. Now we have 2 setups here. I'll talk more about setups later, but let's take a look now. These are 2 setups. One is in container A. Now we must learn how to read pictures. In this container A, I see a plastic film that's covering the container. This will prevent the grasshopper from escaping. Now, tiny holes here. And what's the purpose of these tiny holes? You're right. It is to allow air to enter, right, the container. So grasshopper will have air. Remember, we talked about air is one of the conditions for survival for a living thing such as a grasshopper. There's a container of water here. Hooray! So it also has water for it. and there's also a leaf. And here I'll make an assumption that leaf is a food source for this grasshopper. So there's food. So the grasshopper in container A is very fortunate. It has air, food and water, so it should survive quite well. But whenever there are two pictures or more than two pictures, we must always compare them to look at the differences. Let's take a look at this now. Also a grasshopper, it should be a healthy grasshopper. There's a hole here, so therefore there is also air for it. But I don't see any container of water. I don't see any leaf. So this grasshopper, it only has air, but water and food, it does not have these two important conditions necessary for it to survive. Now that we've understood the picture, let's take a look at the question. In which container, A or B, will the grasshopper survive longer? Give your reason. If you watched my previous video, you will know that question A is actually made up of two parts. The first part is to state which container. The second part is to give your reason. The reason is always linked to the science concept behind it. And the science concept has been discussed here. We talk about the conditions needed for living things to survive. We say this grasshopper has all the conditions in it, whereas this one only has some of the condition. It does not have most of the condition. So that will be the reason that we will use. Alright, so therefore we can say that containers A grasshopper will survive longer. This is to answer part 1 of the question. But by answering this, you actually get 0 mark even if you can choose the correct container, because marks is given if you can explain it. Why? It is because as teachers, we want to know if you have understood the science concept. Therefore, you are only given marks if your concept is correct. So your because part is important, because the grasshopper in A has air, food and water, as we talked about it earlier on when we try to understand the question. But the grasshopper in B only has air. As you can see here, it only has air. For the primary trees, you can pause the video here to do the corrections. For the rest, the P4 and 5, so you can carry on to read the rest of the question and to try it. Now, Joe set up another two containers C and D as shown below for another experiment. Now we assume that there are another two healthy grasshoppers here. And let's compare them again. So this grasshopper has a hole in the plastic film. This means that air is present. Here for grasshopper D, there is also air for the grasshopper. This one has water also. This one, no water. This one, no food. This one, also no food. In this case, the food is the leaf, as we have seen in part A of the question. So what is it trying to do here? Alright, I'm not too sure yet. Let's read on. Now Joe wanted to test if grasshoppers need food to survive. Now this language tells you that is the aim of his experiment, or that is the purpose of his experiment. He wants to find out if grasshopper need food to survive. Now, if that is the aim of the experiment, which is to find out if grasshopper need food to survive, then in his experiment, he must have one change variable. And the change variable, alright, in this experiment must be food. He must talk about having one container with food, whereas the other container should not have food. So let's take a look. But right now, both containers do not have food. So then that is not useful, right? So let's see. So in this case here, I will take a look at the first condition. Alright, if he wants to find out if grasshopper need food to survive, I will put a leaf in container A. And container B, I will not put any food. Right? So here's add the container D. So let's say I will add a leaf to container D. So container C will have no food. Let's see if I do this. How will it be like? But then there's a problem here, because right now you see all the other variables like the presence of air, and water must be kept the same. So you see here, there's air already. I know you talk about air. The question here talks about add a leaf. If I add a leaf to D, that means now D has a leaf. So it has food, no food, great. But now it doesn't have water. This has water. So we can't have two variables change. So we must make the variable the same here. So if I add another container of water here, then the only change variable in these two will be the presence of food. Let's see, air, air, yes, both have air. Water, water, both have water now. And food, no leaf, but has leaf. So add water to D, I will say yes. Alright. Now, can I answer differently? What if I try to answer it by saying I add a leaf to D and I said, oh sorry, it shouldn't be a no, D is here, right? So this should be a yes. Yes, leaf here. Water to D, yes. Can I answer it differently? Let's say if I say I add no here. If I put no, that means that D has no leaf and C has no leaf. If both have no leaf, then we cannot test if grasshopper need food to survive because both containers will not have leaf at all. Okay, so this is the only answer. Add a leaf to D, yes. Add water to D, yes. Alright, so for those doing corrections, please take notes. If you want to take down some notes, you may pause the video and write down this as your notes. For the rest, we go on to the next question. Let's go on to question 24. Joanne placed a slice of bread of similar size in each of the jars below. A few drops of water were added to the bread in jar A, but not in jar B. She then covered the jars with covers as shown below. Notice here, no holes, right? If no holes means air cannot enter. But is there a problem? Is there air inside? Yes, there actually is air inside the containers. Alright, let's take note there is already air in a container. Now bread with a few drops of water, bread with no water. So let's take note. Remember, whenever we see two setups, we must make comparison and look for differences. So I notice this is a difference here. There's water here and no water here. Both have air, that is a similarity. Both have a piece of bread, that's a similarity. And the only difference is this. So here I see something about air, about food, about water. The bread is a food. So it must be about survival or living things. But I don't see any living things here. What a living thing could this question be about? So I'll try to get clues by reading on, and then I'll see something here about mold. Oh, so this question is about mold growing in the question. So what's the clue here that you should learn? The trick here doing questions. Don't just read and do part A. Alright? Read question A, read question B, question C, question D, and you can get clue from question B to understand this whole story above, and that can help you to answer question A even. So what was the variable that was changed between the two jars? So notice this was a variable change. Right? To do this, it's always useful to find out what's the aim. We must know why did Joanne try to do the experiment. And when we look at this, I think this is a clue. Look for the variable that's different. So how to look? Compare the two diagrams and spot the difference, which we already have spotted the difference. Next one. The variable that is different is the presence or absence of water in these two jars. Presence and absence. So the answer here will be this. Answer to this question of mine. Joanne wanted to find out if mold grows with or without water. That is the answer to this question. But the answer to this question, the variable that was changed, will be this. This is the answer to part A. The variable that was changed is the presence or absence of water. Okay, now I'll move this up here. After a few days, Joanne observed mold growing on bread in jar A, but not on the bread in jar B. So this evidence is given to you, this observation is given to you. So what can she conclude from her observation? Now we see some words here such as observe, conclude. Right, these words have special meaning in the language of science. So what do they mean? When we look at the word conclude or conclusion, alright, it means that is the answer to the aim. What was the aim? We talked about it earlier on, and the aim is this. Joanne wanted to find out whether moles need water to grow or not, whether mole grows with or without water. Alright, that's the aim, to find out if water is needed for mole to grow. If there is an aim, then the conclusion must be for this aim. It's an answer to this. So after a few days, she observed this. So what will be the answer? Well, the conclusion will be based on her observations, right? This is the answer. Joanne concludes that mole grows better in the presence of water. Or you can also say Joanne concludes that mole needs water to grow. Basically, when you say conclude, you must know that's the answer to the aim. And what's the aim? You got to figure out what's the aim. In this question, the aim was not given. You have to figure it out by reading the whole story and understanding it. That's why I talked about this earlier on, to find out the aim of the experiment. Those doing correction, this will be the answer to part B. The rest, let's go on to part C. Joanne took some of the mold from the bread in jar A and placed them in an empty jar. Oh, empty jar. What does an empty jar means? After a few days, she observed that the mold had not grown. Oh, had not grown. So it stayed the same size, same amount. Give a reason for observation. So the mold stayed the same in terms of the area it covered in the jar. So what does empty jar mean? Let's try to understand this. So I drew a picture for you. So that's the same kind of jar as we have seen above. Alright. Empty means that there is only the mold that she placed inside. Empty means that, but it's not entirely empty. There's still air inside. When I say water, there's no water. Is there food? There's no food, no bread. Alright, so you must observe what is present and what is absent. So what is present? Air is present. What is absent? Water is absent. Food is absent. So, and we know that this mold didn't grow. It has air but doesn't have these two. And remember the word reason? Reason is always based on the concept being tested. And the concept here being tested is about what mold needs to grow well. Alright? A reason is always an explanation based on a scientific concept discussed in this question. So you cannot come up with your own explanation from your own understanding of the world. It must be based on the concept tested in this question. And here is what does mold need to grow well. We know molds, just like other living things, need air, food and water. And it also grow well when it is in a warm environment. So now we know that from the question, mold did not grow, right? So we know mold did not grow. Why? Reason is our answer because it needs air, food and water and warm to grow. But in this question, it does not have food and water, you see. No food, no water in the empty jar. So the answer here basically is this. It does not have food and water in the empty jar. So that will be the answer to part C. Okay, once those are doing correction, you pause the video and do the corrections. The rest, let's move on to the last question that we're discussing in this video, question 27. Now, Peter placed a plant in a container of water, setup 1, as shown in the diagram below. So in this setup, there are several parts here. Now, when I talk about setup is just a big word for some equipment or apparatus that's put together to conduct an experiment. And whenever there are two or more setups, there will be some differences, or usually one difference between them. And most of the other parts should be similar. So whenever you see two or more setups, the best way to get clues is to compare and spot the differences and similarities among them. So we're going to do just this as we're looking at this now. So let's compare between these two. So here I have many variables. Variables are the conditions that we consider when we design an experiment. So let's take a look at these two setups. Let's look at the number of leaves. 1, 2, 3 leaves. 1, 2, 3 leaves. Same number of leaves. Type of plant. I can't tell for sure, but it looks like the same. And in the question below, you see, Peter replanted the plant above in a pot of soil, which is this. So the same plant was used. So definitely same plant was used. Next one, size of the pot looks like the same. Materials, the roots are touching. These roots are touching water. These roots are touching soil. So that is a difference. First clue. Oil on surface here. No oil on this surface. Right, that could be a second clue. There's a difference. Length of the roots looks like the same. Even number and length looks like the same. So same. Location of the experiment. The question didn't say. I'm going to assume it's the same. So main clues we're getting now is about roots. Alright? And what do we know about roots so far? What have you learned about roots? Alright? So we must know the concept being tested here, because that is where that comes from, right? Concept being tested here, we see plants. Alright, let's do a tick. We see plants. And we saw many plant parts like the leaves, stems, and roots. Plant parts. And we see the focus is apparently on the roots, because that's where the difference is happening. So here, we must talk about the function of roots in this first question A. So, what would the water level in the setup? After a few days, would the water level in the container in setup 1 increase, decrease, or remain the same? Give a reason for your answer. So if we know the function of roots is to absorb water, that's one of the function. Alright, if the concept tested here is that roots absorb water, then we know the answer is this. The water level in container in setup 1 decrease. Why? Because roots absorb water. Remember, I've been telling you over and over again, the answer to an explanation like give a reason is always based on the concept being tested. Right? The reason is based on the concept tested. Those doing correction, this would be your answer. For the rest, let's move on to the next part. Part B. Peter replanted the plant above in a pot of soil. So now it's here a pot of soil to let it grow. State a function of part Y in this setup. Now we're talking about plant parts again, but this time around it's still about roots, but roots apparently here is not about absorbing water anymore. So what will be the function in this case? What will be the function in this case? Let's try to remember our function of plant parts. So the concept being tested here is this. Roots hold plant firmly to the ground. Therefore the answer here, the function of plant Y being in the soil will be this. Function of part Y, or the function of the roots, is to hold the plant firmly to the ground. And that will be the answer to part B. Alright, do the corrections and then we move on to the last question in this video. Peter removed all of part X from the setup. He observed that the plant died after several days. Give a reason for Peter's explanation. As you can see, part X is the leaves. What is the function of the leaves? So you see, we are back to this again. We're always testing here function of plant parts, and this time we're testing the function of leaves. So what do leaves do for plants? Leaves trapped light to make food for the plant. So if the leaves are gone, that means there's nothing in the plant to trap light, so the plant wouldn't have food. We know that living things need food to survive as well. Alright, the second concept is this: plant, like other living things, need food to survive. So the answer for this is very simple. When part X is removed, the plant cannot trap light to make food for itself, so it died. And this answer is based on these two concepts being tested in this question. I hope you have learned something from this video, my primary 3, 4s and 5s. Alright, now take a rest and then we'll go on to the next video soon. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.